Truth. What does it mean? It's an actual account of the reality of the facts and how the events truly took place. Whenever the truth is altered or changed, fabricated, expanded upon, we no longer have the truth. We have a motive. Why would the truth need to be altered? Today, we're going to deep dive into the Steven Avery case, the truth, and the altered version of the truth, the plot, and the twists that are involved with the State Crime Lab of Wisconsin, all the way back to 2006 when they were working on Steven Avery's case. Welcome to your Blackout. I'm Danny, also known as RD. I have another channel. It's called 1111 Tarot, which is startling how things are turning out over there. So feel free to go into the description of this video, link down below, and jump on over there into that family too. Now, your screen is intentionally black because I encourage you to do your own research. I encourage you to think outside the box. And a lot of the times, we are distracted by too much information at once. This is a way you can just kind of think things through and draw your own perspective. It's interesting how as a society, we use the word evidence as truth. Truth train coming through. Coincidence? I don't think so. I don't believe in coincidence. Let's talk about the lead investigator at the State Crime Lab, the lead head lab tech, if you will, in this case. Also Brendan's case. Sherry Culhane. Why does that name sound familiar if you're in this case very long? Because she was also the same lead investigating lab tech in the 1985 case of Steven Avery, where he's wrongfully convicted. What is used to convict a person is evidence, right? But as we said, evidence can be changed. And because the perception is that evidence is the truth, we can just slip in a lie, just slip in a plant, just slip in a changed little bit, and the perception changes in the entire case. And this is where wrongful conviction starts. Now you may ask, why do you always go back to 1985, Danny? We're talking about Teresa Halbach, because it all starts, and it's the precursor to the events of Miss Halbach going missing, right? So when we look at the 1985 case, Sherry Culhane was indeed the lab tech in charge of testing all the Steven Avery evidence. Only she. And she got on the stand and she identified a single hair found on the victim, alleged victim, Penny Bernstein. A single hair. Do you remember when Jean Pencil Couchet was in the depositions in 2005? And he gave his deposition to the state of Wisconsin. And he kept saying, where'd the hair come from? Where'd the hair come from? That's interesting, right? So let's dig into that for just a moment. She identified the hair as matching to Steve Avery's hair. Later, it was found out that the hair actually matched another individual that had admitted and confessed while in custody in Brown County of the crime. And it boils down to wrongful conviction, Steven Avery being exonerated in 2003, and he begins his lawsuit against the state of Wisconsin. And it just grows from there, like a snowball rolling downhill. So it was quite interesting that Stephen would have been released in 2002 because all information and testing was now available. The results were in. He was clear. But he was held a full additional year and released on the exact date of 9/11/2003. Why would he have been held a full year? And how could that have been delayed? Again, the name Sherry Culhane comes up. Because this individual working at the lab lost control of being able to be the deciding factor, the discerning factor of who matched DNA and who did not. This is in the infancy of understanding how DNA worked, and so it was being left in charge of a human. You got it, Sherry Culhane. So when 2002, the results were in, it wasn't because Sherry Culhane had re-examined this evidence of this hair. It was simply because it was out of her hands, and now it was part of a data bank of DNA results, of records, and the hair matched the same individual that had confessed in 2009 in Brown County. Now keep in mind, the Brown County deputy had called Manitowoc and reported that this was a confession by a person in custody. And it was Manitowoc County that just hid that information and left it alone. Didn't do anything about it. Said, we got the right guy and we know it. Who said that? Huh? Think back to who was behind all of this and what did they want? Kasurik, the sheriff, and Peterson, right? These two had a hard-on to get Stephen. It was a personal vendetta, and we know this. And that's what the depositions boiled down to when it came to finding out why this had occurred. The responsibility fell onto two individuals, Dennis Vogel and Kasurik. Those were the two being named in the deposition that would have been personally liable to pay back this restitution in this case where Stephen Avery is suing them. So it's now 2005 and time for the depositions. Over 30 members went through the depositions. We get to the last two, the two individuals being sued, Vogel and Kasurik. And lo and behold, Teresa Halbach goes missing. Now, a task force had been formed, the Stephen Avery Task Force, to revamp and rewrite the justice system and bring laws accountable for not doing a proper investigation by tunnel visioning who possibly authorities felt was guilty rather than observing the true evidence in the case. Peg Lautenschlager was our Attorney General of Wisconsin at the time, and she had been in a dispute with Stephen Avery because he was seeking more restitution from the state of Wisconsin and an apology for this entire event. But Peg was not willing to bend on this. It's $25,000, and that's how it works. We did nothing wrong. Well, it came out with Gregory Allen being the one that confessed and matching the DNA results, that there was indeed some things that had went wrong. Let's dig into that. Stephen Avery shining a spotlight on the deficiencies of the crime lab, who directly dealt with the evidence that was being perceived as, quote, truth in all the cases that had been tried in Wisconsin, was opening the proverbial Pandora's box. And we were looking at the bar being set very high as a payout, right? Up to $36 million. Not just times one, but times how many other people that were successful in investigating their own case and finding out that the evidence wasn't exactly the truth. Now, I read in the paper, and I believe I still have the clipping, that Janet Reno, the Attorney General for the United States, working during the Clinton time frame, okay, there was closed doors investigations into Peg Lautenschlager. Who? Do you think that was, you better not have a whole bunch of worms in your can, Miss Lautenschlager? That had to be very, let's just call it anxious moment for Peg Lautenschlager. Because all of a sudden, she now starts having closed-door meetings on the Avery Task Force. And on the same day that Teresa Halbach goes missing, Peg Lautenschlager, turns out, full force, grabs the task force, the Avery Task Force, and completely changes the name and fires all the people working on the Avery Task Force and puts her own team in place. And guess what? This all happens in 2002. Stephen's still in prison for a year of wrongful conviction where everyone knew he was innocent. Do you think they were making a game plan? Oh, they were. Now, let's think about this. The two people that go missing in this case, really missing, are Teresa Halbach and Kasurik, because he just disappears. He's not really talked about. He hands the torch over to Peterson, and he just kind of disappears into nothingness. Because the Teresa Halbach case forced Stephen to settle out of court for $450,000, which paid for his lawyers at the time. And why? Because he had a lawsuit against him. And the Halbachs also had a lawsuit at the same time against Stephen, trying to freeze all his funding so he could not hire a defense team in this current trial of 2005, which was going to come up in 2006. A judge actually recused himself because he said this was unethical. You cannot take away a man's right to his own defense. Stephen was overqualified for a public defendant due to the $450,000 reward of that lawsuit. He was not going to get a public defender, and Halbach was freezing his account. So in comes a lawyer, Buting. Jerry Buting comes up with an idea that if Stephen writes a check real quick to his defense team before the team can get this all locked down over there, then he can pay him and he'll take the case. And he happens to know another guy, Dean Strain, that'll come on board and help the case. And voila. But isn't it strange that Jerry Buting was on the Avery Task Force, not fired, and working behind closed doors with Peg L, and now he's Stephen's lawyer? Never in my life can I swallow that without a lump in my throat. I don't care what you guys say. I'm not here for your approval. I'm here to speak the truth. Do your research, dig deep, draw your own conclusions. So I said this was going to be about the crime lab. This is all about the crime lab It's about protecting the heirs and the misfortunes that are happening that are going to trigger this onslaught of wrongful conviction, post-conviction, landslide of lawsuits headed right for the state of Wisconsin. We see in 2006, during the Steve Avery case, Sherry Culhane fills out deficiency reports on sneezing, coughing, whatever, spraying her own saliva onto the only bullet fragment in the case. So it can never be retested. She claims, let me back up, that deficiency report was filled out where she has to ask for permission or document that she's leaving protocol, because if you contaminate the control source, the evidence is null and void up to this point. And she contaminated the control. That's right, the standard in the scientific test, which is like a scientific law. You have to follow that rule because you can't compare apples to apples if one now is a banana. You just can't do it. So she fills out this report before the incident happens. She's psychic. That's it. Let's dig a little deeper. Fassbender sends her a message. Can you put her in the garage? Try to put her in the trailer. You're going to put her? That's a word for purposeful, intent, decision being made, motive, with a goal. Right? Well, this entire time, the state crime lab gets paid if the person that the cops feel and is presenting as a suspect is found guilty. If that individual that the cops, the investigators, have said, this is our suspect, is not guilty, the state crime lab does not get paid. Not a dime. So, do we have a biased representation in our state crime lab? I don't know. How's Manitowoc been getting away with all of their doings? Manitowoc has been doing the same MO for years. I've talked to the locals. They've got the one in place at that crime lab that they can pull the strings on. The crime lab is their puppet. So if they say you're guilty, you can almost guarantee that what's going to be produced, whether it's true or not, is the evidence that the state crime lab is going to point to you. So get along with the Manitowoc cops, right? Yeah. Well, state crime lab Sherry Culhane actually was investigated. Directly, the crime lab was. In 2006, they were investigated by a sister crime lab. The Milwaukee crime lab came over and investigated their sister crime lab in the state of Wisconsin, the Madison crime lab, where Sherry Culhane works, in 2006. Was it during the Steve Avery evidence findings? Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Sure was. Why? Because it's called covering your ass. She had just made deviation report that was going to be called into question. And they have to show, when you do something like that, where such a critical error is made, you have to show a response to prevent that from happening again, like an SOP, standard operating procedure. Rather than look at blame, let's look at a way to fix it. That's how the food industry works. That's how the crime works, the crime lab. And so, rather than get the FBI in there, they went and got their brother, the Milwaukee crime lab. And he comes over, and even our own in-house investigation hit on a major critical error. And that's the codex boxes. The ones that hold all of the DNA results of all of the DNA collected for each individual, where you feed in the information of a criminal or even someone cleared, it's the DNA box, is unmanned at 14 locations. Unmanned. Just a computer sitting there waiting for anybody to come over and use. They were not locked up, in other words. This is where that snowball starts really having some force. Now it's picking up trees. It's going to be clearing some shit up if this comes out. If Stephen Avery pushes hard enough and he gets out of this, it's going to shine onto the deficiency of how poorly that crime lab was run. We have Culhan talking about wooden shelves and wooden boxes, DNA of both victims and suspects put on the same shelf. Little cupboards that are wooden. I work for a stainless steel company. I can tell you that is the most contaminated place that Sherry Culhane described. It reminds me of Ed Gein's basement. Chances for contamination could be unbelievable from case to case to case to case. And if you think the crime lab in Wisconsin's the only one, oh lordy no, you are totally wrong. Now, let's think about Kratz. What role did he play with the crime lab? Remember that email he sent to Sherry in February of 2006? How delighted and surprised he was that the test results on the loci were within 7, that they matched. That's called perception. They leaked that email purposely to get the word matched heard. He even said he can't help what the perception is, right? The public's perception is what it is. I really feel that the biggest dog in this fight was Sherry Culhane, because she was the only person allowed, according to King Kratz, Sweaty Butt Crack. So when Sweaty Crack is talking to the jury, he makes it abundantly clear. There's no chance for contamination or there's no chance for anything to have gone wrong with the evidence, because we've only had one person allowed to test the Stephen Avery evidence. Only one person volunteered their service. Sherry Culhane, who had been really proven to be deficient in her job all the way back in 2003. You know why? Because it proved she didn't know jack shit in 1985. She had no clue what she was doing. Then you look at the anthropologist, Leslie Eisenberg, but she's the one that came down where she was so unsure because she was starting to see how unreliable things were. She could not rely on these crime labs at all. So when she looked at the same time as the Teresa Halbach case, Leslie Eisenberg, the anthropologist that studies the bones, who doesn't look at the bones until the 10th of November, 2005 in the Halbach case, Avery case, is also driving over a few counties, like 3-4 counties. And she's examining Christine Rudy's bones, allegedly bones. And she determines that that is the infant's bones found in the Christine Rudy's case. Turns out to be bird bones. So she's all shook up. She doesn't know what's human bones and what's not. What about the insects? You know, there's insects that can determine if they're human bones or not, is what I've been told. Why was that never used? Or was that used? Is that how they determined that those were baby bird bones, chicken bones, animal bones? And then you jump over to the Avery case, and we have the state of Wisconsin saying that they gave Halbach animal bones. Makes you wonder, how far did they go? Did they simply use Christine Rudy's bones in this case? Well, no, because she wasn't found until March of 2006. Yes. But really, there was no testing going on. Mitochondrial DNA testing, none of this was going on yet. And yes, they had Christine Rudy's mother's DNA, and they had hers. Brings a lot of questions into this case about the quote-unquote evidence and how truthful it really is. And how many wrongful conviction cases do we have because of Manitowoc's and Sweaty Crack deciding that Factbender needed to go over with Weasel and investigate something because of some personal grudge? Remember, Dave Bogata brings up how, Manitowoc's bringing around, the citizens are bringing around these naked photographs of high up potential people that work at schools as coaches and so forth, trying to get them to be part of the quote unquote club. The No Girls Allowed Club. You think that No Girls Allowed Club? And I said clown. Could you possibly see how they might just simply be a version of Wisconsin Mafia? I mean, seriously, could they have stopped Dr. Seisman, the quote-unquote Candyman, as Rimaker brought up? They knew for 5 years he was selling, well, maybe he was, but they said prescribing many times lethal dosages. What in the hell? Yeah. That's why that state crime lab is the key, literally, to the case. Because that means Sherry Culhane was the one that tested the RAV. She was the one that did everything on that RAV. The blue RAV. The green RAV never made it to the crime lab, I don't feel. They kept it in storage. They pulled it out once to grab the VIN number, blur it up really good. Yeah. Giving you something to think about. A little food for thought for the week. I want to give a shout out to all of you. Thank you so much. We hit 5,000 subscribers. That's incredible. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you for supporting our channel. If you're interested in the Petito case, we're covering that a lot over on 1111 Tarot. The readings, I'm going to tell you the truth. Go look at it yourself. 6 days before Gabby Petito is found, back when they don't even know what state to look in, the card reading pinpointed her body within 21 miles of where she was found. Not once, but twice, and then a third time. It also reveals a lot of information that is just now starting to come to light. And it's all coming to fruition. So you can call it intuition. But if you think you're all analytical, I'll tell you, the best investigators follow their gut. What is your gut? Your intuition. The cards only provide a little means of seeing the photograph of the picture of what the person intuitively knows about the case. When they look at that, they're triggered. Our higher selves know way more. Our subconscious mind retains every bit of information in this case. And if you can follow that intuition into that subconscious, we'll put the dots together. Thanks for staying with me. And much love to everybody. Take care now. Love ya to the moon and back. God bless you.